Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation. I'm going to be taking you through some of the new features available in DLive 1.9. 1.9 is available to download from the website now. We put it online yesterday. We've got a whole host of new features and tools and exciting things to try out with the new firmware release. I'll wait a couple of seconds just to make sure that everyone's sort of filtered in, got comfy, ready to have a good old chat about 1.9. We're going to have a bit of a presentation. I'll do a little bit of demo via Director as well, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. If you do have any questions, there's the Q&A tab at the bottom. Go ahead and put them in the box there, and we will go through them at the end with our panel. Joining us today, we're going to have Nick Beretta, Mike Bangs from our American distributor. We've also got Rob, our managing director, and Anthony Evans, who is our lead DSP engineer and the project manager for 1.9. Daniel says the sound quality is terrible at the moment. Interesting. I haven't done anything different, so let me know if it suddenly gets better. Okay. Might be your end, Daniel. I'll leave you to it for the minute. So let's get into it. 1.9. This is the strapline, deeper and wider, because it goes further than we've gone before in any of our firmware releases. We've reached out to some of our team across the world, some of whom are with us today, some of whom have sent some videos in for immediate reactions. And this one is from Andrew Crawford at our Australian distributor.
Yo, well, I'm here having my first look at DLive 1.9, and besides being a little bit gobsmacked, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Like, the features are just, it's profound. It is just an absolute plethora of new features, and going through it, you know, all these menus that I thought I knew, now it's like Pandora's box. It's like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's in there now? Like, everywhere you go, you find something else. And it's like, okay, I thought I knew DLive, but, you know, yes. So they have definitely pulled out all the stops and given us an amazing amount of features here. There is features in here for every user. So yeah, download 1.9 and get into it.
Thanks, Crawford. We'll be hearing some more from other members of the team a little bit later on in the presentation. So let's have a look at some features. First and foremost, we bought a brand new RTA to DLive. We now have two RTAs. They're both the same, but you can configure them independently. They can be configured as a line, bar, or sonogram. We also have a subtraction mode. There are lots and lots of places where you can see the RTA. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Director up so we can have a look at some of those. You should now be able to see Director. And here we've got the RTA. The RTA in its home. This is in the meters page, and we can see at the top two different RTA tabs. So let's have a look at some of the different options we've got available to us. We've got line, bar, and sonogram. We've also got dual view, where we can view our two RTAs at the same time. And we have our options down the bottom, where we can configure both the speed of the averaging, but also where we're sourcing the RTA from. So the RTA has got a few different options. We can source it from the select key. We've got external control, which means we're seeding control of the RTA to something like Director, a secondary surface, or an iPad. Or we can lock it to a specific channel. I think the way we envisage this being used is that people will have one of their RTAs following their select key, whilst having the other RTA possibly on a reference mic or something like that. So in this case, we've got it following select, and we can see the RTA happily bobbing along there. What's interesting is this isn't the only place you can see the RTA, as I've sort of alluded to. There's actually loads of places. You can see it on an iPad, you can see it on Director, as I've got it here, on the surfaces, on an external monitor. And we've also got RTA in the South view. So if we go ahead and click view, we can see I've got some that are set up here. What's cool about this is using the same RTA engine. So you can view one RTA in multiple different ways without burning up RTA engines. We've got 2 of them, and each one can be viewed multiple times by multiple methods. So although that's a sonogram running at the bottom there, it's still running on RTA engine 1. So a fantastic feature, RTA literally everywhere. There's one place we haven't seen it just yet, which we can have a look at now, which is in the PEQ page. So just like the meters page, we've got some different controls down here for averaging and peak. We can move it around. We can put it up here. We can put it down here. We can change the scale if you've got very, very quiet content, or maybe if you've got very, very loud content, you want to go the other way and bring it down so it's not taking up your entire viewport. So there are lots and lots of different options available to you there. We can also change the type here. So if you want to have a bar or a line. So let's move on to something else. So we've bought RTA and we've bought that tool, but we've also bought some sonic tools to the console as well. We're expanding the gate section quite literally with 2 brand new expanders. We've got the source expander and we've got the dual threshold expander. And when we do our panel at the end, we're going to talk about these in a little bit more detail. So I'm not going to labor the point too much at the moment, but source expander, R&D was sent out to try and find an expansion tool, and we decided to bring something to the table that would be familiar and easy to use for our users, for our engineers. So it's a 3-control source expander. We've got threshold, depth, and also a speed control there at the top. Dual threshold expander is pretty special. So our engineers went away and went, well, we've got source expander and that's easy and people will know how to use this, but we're going to do something quite cool and bring something a little bit different to the table. And that's where we came up with the idea of dual threshold expander. The dual threshold expander combines both a gate and an expander in one device, which allows you to gate stuff that's underneath the lower threshold and then expand things using the upper threshold to control that. Sounds fantastic on drums, and I'll let Anthony and Rob talk a little bit more about the specifics of dual threshold expander a little bit later on in the presentation. But the important thing to note here is these are 2 new things, 2 brand new deep devices for DLive. Just like all of our other deep emulations, there's no additional latency, so you can use these in the channel strip at no sort of latency penalty or cost. You can have one on every input channel if you want one on every input channel. Just like the compressors, these are available everywhere all the time. There's no need to worry about sort of running out of processing power or anything like that. So 2 brand new devices for the gate section on DLive. But the gate section isn't the only place that we've made some changes. We've also made a few different changes to the compressor section, not least bringing a brand new compressor. It's called bus compressor because it's modeled after an industry standard bus compressor, but it's not only available on buses. You can put it on any input and any bus. So I think I'm doing some bad maths here and trying to remember, but I'm fairly confident what this means is you can have 192 of these running at one time. So that's all of the input channels and all of the buses all running at once. So again, just like the other deep emulations and just like the expanders we talked about a minute, you can have this running everywhere all the time. Now, it's really difficult to explain what a bus compressor sounds like and what sort of these things do sonically in the mix. So I've brought in some help. I brought in the help of one of our sort of friendly engineers, Oscar Soderlund from Sweden, who's going to talk a little bit about the changes we've made to some of the compressors, and also a little bit about what bus compressor sounds like to him when he's mixing. Go ahead and play that now.
My favorites are the Optronic Unit B, which gives you, at least in my opinion, a fatter low end and a tighter, smoother low mid range. Sounds even more vintage, and it's very useful on bass. Gives you a bit more room in the mix in the mid range, I think, without losing kind of the punch and the presence of the bass. The Opto compressor has some tweaked transient and burn functions, which makes it sound even more grittier, more present, more punchier. It's hard to say, but it's just a bit more there now. It wasn't bad before, but now it's really good. The bus compressor, my god, it's so good. You can use it subtle, you can use it aggressive, you can use it aggressive with parallel to get punch into your mix. Use it on buses, on channels. I hope to see you out there. I'm super thrilled to get out and mix again. I'm sure you are as well. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks there, Oscar. So compressors aren't the only thing that we've brought to the table Deepwise. In addition to both the compressors and the expanders, we've also introduced the Mix NEQ. I've seen this questioned a few times, both here in this morning session and elsewhere on our social media. The N it's not an acronym. The NEQ is just because it's a little bit of a pun, because it sounds like the English any EQ, because you can now put any EQ into what was the GEQ section. So the NEQ 12 is our new 12-band parametric EQ. You can place this anywhere you used to be able to place the GEQ. The GEQ section has now been renamed, because not only can you have a parametric EQ, but also the old or classic style, I should say, graphic equalizers. So this new EQ can be put anywhere you used to be able to put a GEQ. So that's on all of the buses. That's things like groups, auxes, matrices, and the main. Why would you want this? Well, lots of engineers like to ring out their wedges with a PEQ these days. You can be a bit more precise. You can get in between some of the bands that you used to be able to get with a standard graphic EQ. I, for one, really like it when doing corporate work. If you need to knock out rings in something like a headset or a lavalier, having the ability to have more than 4 bands is really, really useful. So this is something that was requested by a lot of users, and something we were more than happy to spend our time and energy working on. So this is the 12-band parametric EQ that you can place on any of the buses. So that's, some of the audio tools. And when I say audio tools, I mean, the ability to sculpt and change audio that we've brought to 1.9. But we've also introduced lots and lots of different sort of, other tools, other monitoring tools, integrations, and things like that. So the integration we're going to talk about next is Sennheiser. So some of you might be aware that we used to do and still do Shure RF integration with a number of different Shure digital microphone devices. This allows you to see a little bit of information in bank view, such as the battery level, the RF level, the AF level, and the mute status of a wireless microphone, or indeed a wireless guitar pack or something like that. So we've expanded the range. We've expanded the range to include a number of Sennheiser devices. That includes the G3, G4, 300 and 500 series devices, and also the 2000 and 2050 series devices. This just brings a lot more sort of flexibility to users that use Sennheiser. It's not really intended to replace an RF tech. If you're doing a gig that would otherwise have had an RF man or lady looking after all of your RF stacks, this is more to either give maybe small corporate users all that information in one place. Maybe it's to give the monitor engineer on a bigger show the ability to see what's going on with the RF without having to have their own laptop open or something like that. Maybe it's giving a second pair of eyes to the RF situation, as opposed to taking away an entire RF tech's job. So that's Sennheiser wireless integration. But there are other tools that we've brought to 1.9. Gain sharing, really highly requested. So we've done gain sharing in the past. Gain sharing in the past has been pretty much limited to multi-surface users, and also a limited amount of multi-console users using Dante boxes. Gain sharing has now come to 1.9 to allow 2 different DLive systems to share gain information and control over a GigaAce or FiberAce link. What this means is if you've got 2 independent mix racks, these could be mix racks with their own preamps or one with preamps and one such as a DM0, when doing tie lines between the 2, you can access the preamp control on the remote console. What this also means with gain tracking turned on is if on console A, you turn your preamp down by 10 dB, you'll get a 10 dB boost in the digital trim on console B. What this means is you're no longer beholden to whatever the engineer on the console with the preamps is doing or what they're paying attention to. You can both have access to those preamps as if they were on your own console. And you're then able to either share or not share that preamp information to a secondary console. And that console will then have access to those preamps in exactly the same way. There's a few different use cases for this. The really obvious one is digital splits. But if you're you can also do things like multiple mix racks. So if you've got 2 DM48s and with just a little bit of setup on Director for the secondary mix rack, you can pass all of those inputs through to the first mix rack and control them as if they're local inputs. Yeah, so a fantastic tool. Any questions on any of these things, by all means, put them in the chat. Cool, let's move on. So other highly requested features, this was more sort of requested by both the House of Worship market, but also by theatre users to have a little bit more control over LCR. New LCR Plus mode allows you to blend in your center stack out to your left and right to control basically how much stereo image you want to have. This control is also available as one of the new custom rotaries. So if you want to control the amount of divergence in your LCR Plus system, you can do that using one of the channel encoders. Talking about custom rotaries, we've really improved a number of different interface workflows. There's some new soft keys, one of which I'm going to show you now, which is bookmarks. Bookmarks is a brand new feature for 1.9, and what this allows you to do is set up a soft key to take you to any individual place in the interface. So the example I was talking about on my live stream yesterday was that you might have both your RTAs set up and have your second RTA set up as a reference mic. Now, you might not need to see your reference mic all of the time. It might be something you just need to jump into every now and again. If there's a frequency you can't quite place or a strange noise, something like that. Now, to get to the RTA, it's not too bad. You need to press meters and then you need to press the correct RTA. So it's 2 button presses, one of which is on the screen. Well, let's say that you want to get that a bit faster. You don't want to be touching through the screen, finding exactly the right menu. You want to go directly there. Well, you can do that now with bookmarks. So we can do that by going to Surface, Soft Keys, and Soft Key 1 I've got set up as a bookmark. If I now go and find the screen that I want to jump to, so that's going to be RTA2 in this particular case, and I tap the bookmark soft key and then tap RTA2 at the top, you can see you've got these nice yellow boxes that have come up here. That's now assigned soft key 1 to be a bookmark for RTA2. So no matter where we are now on the surface, maybe we're right down in, I'm trying to find a menu that's multi-level, but maybe we're right down here, right down in some menu, our heads down in the console dealing with something, we hear a noise we need to think about. Well, we can now just touch soft key 1 and immediately RTA comes straight up on the screen for us to see. It's not just limited to RTA. We can do all sorts of things with soft keys. So, perhaps if you had I'm trying to find I don't think I've got a MADI card fitted, but let's say we had a MADI card page down here that we needed to keep an eye on. You can set a bookmark so you can quickly jump to your MADI settings if you needed to. You can set a bookmark to go to a processing page, anything you like. So bookmarks are super, super useful. And I'm sure we'll see lots of really interesting use cases as people feedback on Facebook and things like that for what they've been doing with these soft keys. So other soft keys, because it's not just bookmarks, we've got loads of them. If we go into soft keys and we have a look at our drop down, we've got loads more options for ABCD. Now, ABCD, if you're not familiar, has been in for a couple of firmware revisions now. And this allows you to set multiple different input sources for an input channel. And they can't be used at the same time. This is an option, so you can change between them. But for instance, if you had a theatre run and you had maybe 6 people on stage and 2 spare RF packs, you would have each person's RF pack set as input A, and those 2 spare RF packs set as C and D on all of the channels. So if number 4 goes down, you just go to select and you'd go into your ABCD and choose the spare pack that you want to send to it. Now, there are lots of other uses for ABCD. You can do things like have analog backups for digital playback systems, stuff like that. In that case, you'd actually want to change a whole number of channels at once, not just one individual RF pack. And for that, we've got some new soft keys. So you've got to set all, so you can choose all of your inputs and where they're coming from. You can set an individual channel, you can set a range, or you can set ABCD for a DCA group, which means if you're changing the number of things that are in your ABCD group, you can set them to a DCA to basically just to do channel control, that sort of thing. There are some other minor improvements like channel processing, where we can turn individual channel elements on and off. But I think the things that people are going to be most interested in, we now have soft keys for virtual sound check, so you can go in and out of virtual sound check really easily on a soft key. We've got USB play record soft key options. And we have something else that I can't remember. Oh no, bookmarks, which we've done. So lots of new soft key options. One of the other areas we've improved quite a lot is the new South widgets, as we call them. So not only have we got all the RTAs, and if we have a quick look at some of the RTAs, in fact, these are probably set up from this morning's session, you can have multiple RTAs in the view. We talked earlier about the fact that each RTA can be viewed in multiple different ways. You're not burning up an RTA each time you put it in line or sonogram mode or something like that, which means at the bottom, you can have the RTA set up multiple times and just tab through your different views to see the RTA in different ways. And we've also here, as has just appeared, got our new clock and automation screen. So the clock and automation screen has a massive clock, but also has information on the last show record, scene, selected scene, and next scene. So it's really useful if you've got like a heavily scened show, maybe theatre, something like that. There's also our custom information South view. What this allows you to do is build your own view up. So for instance, you can get extra information like last scene description, next scene. So if you've got maybe in your descriptions, you've got mix notes or something like that you want to be able to refer to, you can put that in the South view now and have that all available to view at the touch of a button. Where are we? Another really popular one when I was lucky enough to preview the software a couple of weeks ago was the I/O screen updates. So you can now name I/O ports and DX ports. So if we have a look in the I/O screen at the moment, I've got it turned off and I've got my classic view here with the DX port number and the I/O card number. By going to setup, I can give these custom names. So in this example, my I/O port 1 has got a Dante card in, so I've given that the name VSC, short for virtual sound check. My other I/O ports aren't in use, but for instance, if we were sending Maddie out to a broadcast truck or something like that, I could call one of my I/O ports truck. If I now turn custom names on, you'll see in the top, if you'll see in the top that my DX ports, for instance, have changed to things like stage right, drum, and my I/O cards have changed to virtual sound check, truck, and I've got one that's currently unused. But these could be named for anything you like. So this could be specific to your venue, or maybe even specific on a show-by-show basis. You could change what these cards say. If you're doing something with multi-surface, you could, for instance, let yourself know that that I/O card slot is being used by a GigaRace card for your multi-surface setup. When you touch the I/O card slot, you'll see now at the top here, it says Mixrack I/O card port 1 inputs, and afterwards we've appended the name of the I/O card. So whatever type of I/O card you've got in there, you'll be able to see it at the top here whilst you're patching. Yeah. So one of the other updates we've come out with is custom channel rotaries. Custom channel rotaries have existed for a while, and we've added some new functionality. We talked a little bit about divergence earlier, which is for use in LCR plus mode, but we've also introduced front rear pan when you're mixing in 5.1, so you can have one of your soft keys, one of your channel rotaries set up to be left and right, and one to be front and back. In addition to some other bits and bobs like stereo width, divergence, low pass filter, gate threshold, and gate depth. We've also made some updates to the scene system. We now have a power up mix rack scene. So you might decide that when you turn your mix rack on, you want it to do the same thing every time. This might be something simple like muting all the inputs and outputs in the case of some sort of power failure or something like that. Or if you're using some sort of power sequencer, you can have it set up. To bring up an individual scene for what happens, every morning when you turn your mix rack on. We've also added some extra little bits that have been very highly requested by certain users, which includes the last scene that's been recalled, but also the last scene recalled before the console was turned off. So that will now persist after you've restarted your console. Director has seen a number of updates, and I can show you some of them now. Some of them, unfortunately, because I'm using Director to demo this, I won't be able to do. One of the most important updates to Director is if you're using a surfaceless system, so maybe it's an install, maybe you're doing a lot of mixing on Director itself or via iPads, IP8s, that kind of thing, you can now do a firmware update of the mix rack from Director directly by going to Settings and Unit Update. Obviously, I can't do that right now because we're demoing this, but the option is there, and it's really useful and a really clean way of doing firmware updates if you don't have a Surface. We've also bought Catalina and Big Sur support. There's been a lot of work in the back end to make sure that Director is fit for the future, fit for future updates of Mac OS. We are not quite at the Q&A yet. We'll be arriving at the Q&A with our panel fairly shortly. So if you do have any questions, now is the time to put them in the Q&A. We'll be having some of our experts from R&D. We'll be having Mike from over at American Music and Sound, and we'll have Nick Beretta from our department there to answer your questions, and so we can have a chat about all the new features, maybe things you'd like to see in a new update, something like that. So 1.9 has got quite a lot of smaller workflow improvements, things that, are very handy for, maybe more niche groups of users or something like that. That includes things like security on MIDI. So you can now have a certificate to make sure that not anyone can get on your network and recall things on your DLive. We've made some additional updates to the apps, for instance. So now if your iPad updates, but you're not ready to do an update to your console, the 1.9 version of the DLive app will be backwards compatible with 1.8. So you can control DLives using 1.8 or 1.9 with the 1.9 app. We've made some changes to the Optronic as Oscar touched on. So we've got two different versions of the Optronic compressor, and I'll get Rob to talk about that in a few minutes, about the changes that we've made and what that sounds like. But yeah, loads and loads and loads of updates, lots of workflow improvements, loads of work has gone into making sure that this is as good as it can be. I think we are ready for our panel and our Q&A. Hopefully, some of my fine colleagues will be there on the other end.
Hi, Jack, and
Hi.
hello, everyone. Yes, we had plenty of questions coming in, Jack, and I have a few selected here for you and for Rob Anthony and Mike Banks. The first one possibly for you, Jack. A couple of people were asking to clarify the difference between gain sharing and gain tracking. Some were under the impression that we had some form of gain sharing before. It wasn't exactly sharing. So if you can touch on that, and what is there are some subtle differences between the two you might want to reinforce.
Absolutely. So we've had gain tracking for a little while, and gain tracking will respond to preamp changes with a compensatory trim. What does that mean? Well, it means if gain tracking is turned on and the preamp is increased by 10 dB, there'll be a 10 dB digital trim down to keep the audio level the same. So what's new? Well, what's new is the idea of gain sharing. In the past, you've been able to gain track on the same mix rack. So that's been predominantly aimed at multi-surface users. But what's new is the ability to share that gain information and share preamp control across multiple consoles. So now using a Fibrace card or a GigaRace card, you can share that preamp information and preamp control between two separate DLive systems. So I know a number of users who've been using multi-surface because they really need the gain tracking, but they need some more buses. And this is fantastic for those kind of users because you've got two discrete systems with full effects, with full bus count, but you can still maintain that gain tracking and gain compensation. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And there's a couple of questions. I think, Anthony, you were answering about the slope of filters for the NEQ12. Someone was asking about 6 dB per octave filters.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's pretty much, it's a no. Currently, we've offered a 24 or 48 dB. We've gone in the other direction, rather than, we've made it steeper rather than less steep. It is something, it's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to know more about the use case and what, yeah, where that would be used. I'm kind of interested in that. But I've not personally heard of a request for that previously.
I'm sure we can get back to the user offline and find out more.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And again, I was having a bit of a side conversation with Andrew, who was asking about the new LCR Plus mode and whether now we could have a divergence or width control for stereo channels, which I don't think is the case. I believe hard stereo channels are still panned hard left and right, but it was making a good case for an effect return from a reverb in an LCR setup to have some form of a divergence control towards the center channel. So a very good point, Andrew. Something that we can consider for the future. As for your other question, Andrew, about the effects returns and the width control, you can route an effect engine back to a full input channel if you want to do so, instead of a short effect return, and that would give you the width control as part of the stereo channel. Right, Richard is asking, is the firmware update packaged with Director, Jack, or do you still have to download the file separately?
Sort of. So if you've got a mix rack only system, so if you're not using a Surface, then yes, absolutely, it's packaged with Director and you can update directly from the application. If you do have sort of a more standard system with a Surface, then you will need to download the firmware and do the usual USB key firmware update process.
Very good. Question on the NEQ12. I'm afraid the answer is no, but maybe Rob or Anthony want to expand on that one. Is the NEQ12 available as an insert? I presume what Justin means is input channel insert.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not at the moment. So the whole concept of the NEQ12 is to really take over that GEQ space on your output channels. And the main aim obviously is to keep all of that deep, it's zero latency, and we've, enabled you to have these, all these extra PEQ bands now. Whether you want that as an insert then to be able to insert it into an input channel, I understand that really you're asking for more PEQ bands as an input channel, I guess, but that is something else to think about. But obviously then that wouldn't be deep anymore, and you lose your coherency. So yeah, interesting to think about there.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And Loic was asking about the Sennheiser integration, whether that includes in-ear monitors, like in-ear transmitters. I'm afraid it doesn't, Loic. It's limited to wireless microphone receivers. And in the session this morning, we had a question about the 6000 series, for example, from Sennheiser, and why we don't support that. And again, we were explaining that the 6000 uses a completely different control protocol, so we had to make some tough decisions on which lines we could support or not. But by all means, send us your feedback on all of that. There's a couple of questions on dual threshold expander. Jack, you explained the concept of it and where it differs from the simpler source expander, if you like. Maybe Anthony, you want to say something more about the two threshold controls and what?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really quite proud of this, really, because I lead the DSP team underneath, and I'm really proud that the members of the team that worked on this could manage to. I feel like we've kind of provided with something that isn't out there at the moment. So obviously we're looking. We've had lots of feature requests for expanders, and we started a research project. Kind of had a look at what was out there, and you kind of see some of the limitations of the things that are out there. And the biggest one being that there's a fixed limit between your open threshold and your gating threshold further down. So, you know, your expansion, the width of the expansion region, that's about 16 dB for most of the things that are out there. And that's actually true for the source expander as well. So the source expander is great because if you're in a hurry, load it up on your vocals, it's going to sound great pretty much straight away. Get your single threshold set, simple to use, you're ready to go. Now, if you've got a little bit more time, or you've got a slightly more problematic stage, if you've got a very noisy stage or actually a very quiet stage, you can use the dual threshold expander to control that width of the expansion region. So you can set your lower threshold to be just above the noise floor where you want to destroy everything below that. And then obviously, then you set your upper threshold as you would normally do a gate or an expander. And it gives you much more refinement in that space. And obviously we've also allowed you to really dial in your own attack and release ballistics at that point as well. So much finer control. So if you've got the time, I definitely recommend playing with it and try and set that up. Sounds pretty good. The other element as well, I've totally forgotten my train of thought. I'm very sorry. I'll get back to you. There was another point that I had that was good, and I'll come back to you.
That's right. Yeah, we'll look back to you, Anthony. I want to bring in Banks a second because we're getting so many questions on gain sharing, and I think we'll probably have to do some formal tutorial video. Maybe Jack and Banks or the two of them together can come up with some video on how to use it and when. But Banks, I believe you had plenty of requests from rental companies and tours on gain sharing before. So do you want to clarify the use case for it and why people were desperate for that feature?
As Jack mentioned, the most common use for gain sharing or active gain tracking across multiple engines would be for doing digital splits. Sharing one set of preamps, foregoing an analog splitter has become the more modern workflow now. Analog split racks, copper transformer splits are becoming less common as people are moving towards a simpler and cleaner use. The one caveat of doing a digital split is that you have and oftentimes a singular preamp control, leaving someone on the split end to only have trim. This new feature allows gain control across both systems, but it also allows for compensation so that if one person were to adjust the gain, that on the other system, the resulting gain boost or cut would be compensated for with an alternate direction of trim. So if I were to boost the analog by 3 dB, the other console would have their trim cut by 3 dB to keep their level the same. That's the most common use that we're seeing, and where basically all of their requests came from, whether it be for live touring or in house of worship applications. The use case seems to be pretty uniform there.
Thank you. Look forward to a video of you and Jack compensating for each other's gain changes. One question for Rob, if he's still here, about the Optronic. What's it all about? Optronic Model B, and someone spotted the emphasis changes to the emphasis sidechain mode.
Yeah, we got hold of another one of the classic units that Optronic's based upon, an older unit from the obviously LA style compressor, and the unit B is an older unit, and I can only assume the photocell inside the unit is a bit maybe it's had a harder life, had some different ballistics, different attack and release ballistics, and I modeled that during the space of 1.8 1.9. I think Unit B sounds a bit more relaxed on some program, a bit more musical. However, I think some people find it a bit more punchy. So maybe the way the attack changes can be different on different program. So we've modeled that, and we've been able to afford it in the build of 1.9. So you can switch between Unit A and Unit B. The other thing we had a bit of feedback on, a lot of engineers weren't used to LA2A emphasis control, the famous potentiometer on the back panel. So obviously we accurately modeled the emphasis control in our first example of Optronic. A lot of engineers say, well, I don't really use that. I want some classic sidechain filter setup. So we've condensed the range of the pot. You've still got the same kind of emphasis min to max as you had on the previous Optronic, but you can then go beyond that. There's a couple of settings, which is an 80 Hertz cut, and then an 80 Hertz cut with a 5K HF cut too, and they were two examples that were requested. So I hope that gives you a little bit more flexibility and visibility of what could be going on in the sidechain filter. So that's what happened with Optronic.
Thank you, Rob. Question from Richard. Do you need to be at version 1.88 to upgrade to 1.9? No, you can be at any delay version. You can update straight to 1.9. And a question from Stephen, wondering if the name changes on the I/O devices now appear on the input side, as in the new custom names for the I/O tabs. And Jack, I believe we checked this morning in the other session, and that is not the case for the input drop-down menus.
Yeah, that's correct. In that at the moment we don't do that, but that's not to say it isn't something we couldn't look at doing in the future.
Right, and our good friend David Millward. Hi, David. He's asking about the two RTAs and whether there's any chance of having two different RTAs, maybe one on a measurement microphone, one on the mix output, and a comparison between the two, automatically measure, compensate for delays. We're not there yet at that level of sophistication, but we have some tools to display the two RTAs at the same time, like Jack is showing. And even a mode to subtract one from the other with a sonogram. Anthony, anything to say about that one?
Sorry, it wouldn't unmute. Yes, yeah, I was looking at that question. The answer really is, I think you can manually compensate using the delay on your channels if you set that up correctly. So it's a bit more of a step. We don't do it automatically, but the subtraction mode on the sonogram should really help. I think we did this. This is the reason that subtract mode exists, really. We conducted this test in the office as we were testing this, and yeah, it works pretty well for the resolution that we provide on the screen. So hopefully that will be useful to you guys.
Dare I say, Rob, that we're getting more people asking for deep modeling on EQ
I think
styles.
It's unique. I think that's your alias, isn't it?
No, you can clearly see it in the Q&A box. It's
Really?
it's not coming from me. But yeah, that's a question
Nick,
for you. I'm
Nick's
afraid.
always very keen on requesting more EQ. Of course, it's something on the list of things to do, and we're actively researching it. Yeah, I'm sorry it's not there yet, but it's coming soon. How's that for an answer?
Yeah, that's great. Again, another question on gain sharing. Justin, you might have answered that one, Jack, but is it just between two systems, or can you have gain sharing between front of house monitor and broadcast?
At the current time, we're only supporting between two surfaces, or two systems rather. That's not to say it won't work with more, but we need a bit more time to make sure that everything is up to scratch before we talk about more than two surfaces doing gain sharing.
I'm seeing a few feature requests as well. That's inevitable with these webinars. And Andrew is asking about improvements to USB playback in general. And these are things that, again, Andrew, we can get back to you separately and discuss outside the webinar. I think we covered most of the questions. I just want to go around maybe and ask, starting with Banks, what's your favorite feature in 1.9?
Easily the bus compressor. It's absolutely fabulous. I was happy with my mixes before, but I've added bus to all of them, running just an almost unnoticeable or unmeasurable amount of gain reduction. But just for the zhuzh factor, it just has a really nice gluing effect. So yeah, I'm running maybe a quarter dB of gain reduction, but there's just something magical, as there was with the analog unit. There's just something wonderful about that bus compressor. So try it out, and I'm very excited that it's available on inputs as well. So.
Yeah, glue is the word that many people use to describe it. And Dimitri says, fantastic. And bus compressor, we can use it on the parallel path as well. Yeah, absolutely. You can do parallel compression with it. What about you, Jack? Your favorite? Go on.
Oh, dual threshold expander, hands down. I've been playing with it on some multi-tracks. I am going to be lucky enough to mix a show with it at the weekend. Dual threshold expander on drums. It's changed. I think it's going to change my life.
That was going to be my point, Jack.
Well,
I was going to say, try it on drums, try it on drums, try it on strings, try it on everything.
I was sat with a multi-track that I have, a band I recorded in a pub. So it's like really dirty multi-track, lots of noise everywhere, lots and lots of bleed. And I was just sat there going, oh, I can make this snare sound amazing. So yeah, looking forward to that at the weekend.
Anthony, it's got to be the RTA. For no other reason, they will stop all of the product managers hassling you for.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. What I love about the RTA is it can be everywhere. We've really tried to think about where you're going to need to look at it. The extra options we put with the external screen, on the EQ, on the NEQ12, and all the new south views. I think it makes it look amazing. I like it.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say, from a user standpoint, I know the requests were to have the RTA underneath the parametric EQ, and I want to applaud the fact that the team took that request and not only satisfied that request, but upped it about 5 notches. So once you get into the RTA section, it really is impressive, the work that's been done. So I'm excited for everyone, myself included.
Yeah, I second what Banks just said. And just before we get back to the questions, Rob, a difficult one, but of all the compressor models you modeled,
I'm going to surprise you all. I think it was amazing to see NEQ rock up. Not only because me and Anthony came up with a cool name, NEQ, which was born out of the idea of any EQ. So many people have said, look, we want more out of an area where a graphic EQ sat, and what can we do with it? Why can't we place notches where we need on problematic material? And I think I think NEQ rocking up is one of my favorites. The other thing is the bookmarks. I call them screen marks, because I can't remember where everything is in these menus. I don't use the mixer every night like you guys do. So I think the bookmarks is a really cool idea for old aging heads like myself.
Thank you. In fact, we had quite a lot of...
Nick? What about you?
Difficult. I don't know. I think the expanders are a great addition, but I was going to say that we had a lot of feedback on features that internally we considered not as big or as marketable in terms of what goes first on the web page. But like Crawford was saying, labeling of the I/O sockets and all that's his top favorite. And other people are saying, yeah, bookmarks or some of the soft key additions and the custom rotary additions, and it's all workflow improvements that keep adding to the usability of the platform. So yeah, it's all great. Question from Phil on gain sharing again, and whether connected DX devices will be are part of the gain sharing. So does the second console see the gain information also the DX expanders and not just the mix rack? Jack or Banks?
So DX is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yes. So and basically anything connected to the mix rack directly. So it does not include things like the Surface preamps, but all of the analog I/O on a mix rack and its DX ports for sure.
And Chris is asking, can you assign the RTA to the external screen and not just mirror the select screen? And yes, you can. The R&D developers added an option for the external screen, which is just the RTA, so it can be locked to the RTA screen all the time. And I think with that one, we covered all of the questions. Again, if you have further questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with the team through our support channel or Facebook. You can reach Jack and the rest of the team very easily. So please don't hesitate to get back in touch. And Jack, I'll leave you to wrap up.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate your company and your time and your energy. As Nick said, if you do want to get hold of any of us, there are multiple ways. You can go to support.allen-east.com. You can go to the community at community.allen-east.com, which is our own forum. The best place, if anyone has any feature requests or would just like to know more about the console, that's the absolute best way to post them. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to all my co-panelists for assisting, and see you all very, very soon. Bye for now.